The silence of the night in Austin, Texas, was disturbed by the distant sound of a motorcycle speeding down the empty road. Colin Strickland, a well-known cyclist in the city, parked his bike on the sidewalk and looked up at the building where Emo Wilson was staying. He hesitated for a moment, still holding his helmet, as he thought about what he had just done. The night had started with a simple meeting, but now something in the air felt wrong. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had been followed, that someone was watching his every move. Inside the apartment, Emo was relaxed, unaware that the events of the night were about to take a dark turn. Soft music filled the air, creating a false sense of security. Emo lay on the sofa, her eyes fixed on her phone screen as she exchanged messages with Colin. She trusted him, believing that the brief romance they had shared was something special. But the darkness outside, where Colin still stood, hid secrets she could never imagine. While Colin remained motionless outside, a shadowy figure watched from a distant corner. This person's eyes were fixed on the motorcycle, then on the apartment, and finally on Colin. Something was about to happen, something that would forever change the lives of everyone involved. The night continued, dense and oppressive, as if the very air was thick with tension. And then Colin moved. Welcome to Spooky Stories. I'm Milo, your guide through the chilling and the unknown. Here, we dive into terrifying tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Join our community of thrill seekers, and let's explore the darkness together. If you're curious about how I keep my concentration, efficiency, performance, and mental health at their peak every day, I'm going to share with you 2 resources that I use daily in my video creation routine. First, breathing for sleep. This method is essential for my deep, restful nights, ensuring I wake up refreshed and ready to create high-quality content. And the best part? The super easy to incorporate into your routine. And then there's the 7 seconds at-home ritual. This ritual is backed by 4 neuroscience studies and helps to supercharge my brain power, keeping my focus sharp throughout the entire day. Want to try these resources and feel the difference in your routine? The links are right here in the video description and pinned in the comments. Don't miss this chance to elevate your productivity and mental well-being. The next morning began with a scream. Caitlin Cash, the friend Mo was staying with, entered the apartment after a long night at work. As she opened the door, she found Mo lying on the bathroom floor, blood spreading like a horrible stain across the marble tiles. Her scream echoed through the apartment as she rushed to Mo's lifeless body, desperately trying to find any sign of life. Panic completely overtook her, and her hands trembled as she dialed 911. As paramedics and police arrived at the scene, the news of Emo Wilson's death began to spread. The cycling community was in shock. Emo was a rising star, a young talent admired by everyone. How could something so terrible happen to someone so promising? The questions began to pile up, and a single word hung in the air: murder. Colin Strickland was the first name to emerge in the investigation. He was the last person to have been with Emo the previous night, and his text messages to her showed that they had met shortly before her death. The police summoned him for questioning, and he tried to explain that he had left Emo at the apartment safely. But the detectives weren't convinced. There was something in his story that didn't add up, something they needed to understand better. The doubt about his innocence began to grow among the investigators. As the investigation progressed, more details began to emerge. Neighborhood security cameras captured images of a black Jeep Cherokee circling the area in the hours leading up to the murder. However, identifying the vehicle was difficult, and the police still didn't have a clear connection between the car and the crime. Colin, on the other hand, was increasingly under pressure. His alibi had gaps, and he knew the police were seriously considering the possibility that he was involved. During questioning, Colin began to reveal more about his relationship with Mo. He admitted that, although they were just friends recently, they had had a romantic relationship in the past. However, he insisted that he had no reason to harm her. The detectives, however, weren't convinced. The motivation seemed clear: jealousy, anger, perhaps even fear that Mo could ruin his current relationship with his girlfriend, Caitlin Armstrong. While the police focused on Colin, a new lead began to form. A more detailed examination of Mo's phone revealed a series of threatening messages she had received in the weeks leading up to her death. These messages came from an unknown number, but the tone was clear. Someone was watching Mo, someone who saw her as a threat. Colin's suspicions seemed well-founded until an unexpected connection began to emerge. The name Caitlin Armstrong appeared in Mo's old messages, and a new line of investigation began to take shape. With the revelation of the threatening messages, detectives began to explore the connection between Mo Wilson and Caitlin Armstrong. Caitlin was known in the cycling community, but she was more recognized as Colin Strickland's girlfriend. They had a relationship that seemed solid on the surface, but internal tensions were beginning to show. Caitlin was a determined woman with a strong personality, and according to close friends, she was extremely protective of her relationships. The discovery that Mo and Colin had a history together was enough to ignite a fire of jealousy in Caitlin, who was now on the investigators' radar. As Colin became increasingly anxious about the progress of the investigation, the police began to focus on Caitlin. They realized that, despite all the evidence pointing to Colin, something didn't quite fit. Caitlin's behavior in the days following the murder caught their attention. She was distant, avoided questions, and, above all, seemed obsessed with following every detail of the investigation. This obsession made the detectives question her true motivations. Then the investigators discovered that Caitlin owned a black Jeep Cherokee, the same model captured on security cameras on the night of the crime. A cold chill ran down the detectives' spines. Until that moment, the main focus had been on Colin, but this new information began to drastically change the direction of the investigation. If Caitlin was somehow involved, it could explain her evasive behavior and the threatening messages sent to Mo. Determined to follow this new lead, the detectives confronted Colin about the vehicle. He admitted that the Jeep belonged to Caitlin but seemed genuinely surprised by the suggestion that she could be involved. She wouldn't be capable With Caitlin Armstrong now the prime suspect, the investigation turned into a race to gather all the evidence needed to bring her to trial. The police obtained a search warrant for the apartment Caitlin shared with Colin, and what they found there only solidified their suspicions. In a drawer in the bedroom, they discovered a 9mm pistol, the same caliber as the bullets found in Mo's body. Moreover, the gun still had traces of gunpowder, indicating it had been fired recently. As the evidence against Caitlin piled up, Colin was cleared as the main suspect, but not before going through an intense emotional ordeal. He found himself torn between the horror of Mo's murder and the growing conviction that the woman he loved was responsible for it all. Caitlin, on the other hand, maintained her innocence until the very last moment, but her desperate attempt to flee the country revealed her true state of mind. The final chapter in Caitlin's saga unfolded when she fled to Costa Rica. where she underwent a rhinoplasty and altered her appearance. Hiding under a new identity, she became a yoga instructor in a small, isolated community on the remote beaches of Santa Teresa. For over a month, Caitlin lived what seemed like a new life, working in a local hostel and teaching yoga to tourists and locals, all while keeping a low profile. But the authorities, now involving the U.S. Marshal Service, were closing in. The breakthrough came when they discovered that Caitlin's sister's passport had gone missing, suggesting that Caitlin might have used her sister's identity to flee the country. Investigators tracked her to Costa Rica and, in an audacious move, set a trap. They created a fake job posting for a yoga instructor at a nearby hostel, hoping to lure Caitlin out of hiding. The plan worked. Caitlin, believing she was safe, responded to the ad. When she arrived for the interview, she was met by undercover officers. Despite her altered appearance, they recognized her immediately. The bandage on her nose, which she claimed was from a surfing accident, was a telltale sign. Her capture was swift, and she was arrested without resistance. After 43 days on the run, Caitlin Armstrong's escape had come to an end. She was deported back to the United States and Caitlin Armstrong's trial was highly anticipated, not just by the Austin community, but by the entire nation that had followed every detail of the investigation and her capture. The courtroom was packed when the proceedings finally began, with journalists, friends of M.O. Wilson, and members of the cycling community in attendance, all seeking justice. Caitlin, dressed in the orange prison uniform, entered the courtroom with a serious expression, no longer displaying the arrogance that had once defined her. She knew the tide had turned against her. The prosecutor began the case with a powerful narrative, meticulously detailing the events that led to M.O. Wilson's tragic murder. He portrayed Caitlin as a woman consumed by jealousy and obsession, who had coldly planned the murder of her rival in a desperate act of vengeance. The jury listened intently as the prosecutor outlined the sequence of events. The threatening messages sent to M.O., Caitlin's surveillance of Mo's apartment on the night of the crime, and finally, the moment when she broke in and fired 3 fatal shots. The defense, on the other hand, tried to present a different picture. They argued that Caitlin was a confused and emotionally unstable woman who had become the perfect scapegoat for a crime she could not remember committing. The defense also raised questions about Colin Strickland's involvement, suggesting that he might have played a more active role in the crime than he admitted. However, these attempts to shift the blame were not enough to convince the jury. The most damning evidence was the forensic analysis of the DNA found on M.O. Wilson's bicycle. This crucial detail, combined with the recovery of the murder weapon in Caitlin's apartment and the records of her Jeep Cherokee circling the area on the night of the murder, painted an inescapable picture of guilt. Moreover, Caitlin's attempt to flee to Costa Rica and dramatically alter her appearance reinforced the prosecution's narrative that she was aware of her guilt and desperate to avoid capture. After weeks of testimonies and evidence, the case was finally handed over to the jury. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as everyone awaited the verdict. It didn't take long for the jury to return. When the judge asked for the verdict to be read, the room fell silent. Caitlin Armstrong, we, the jury, find you guilty of first-degree murder. Caitlin's expression remained unchanged, but the decision was a visible relief to M.O. Wilson's family, who had attended the trial every day, hoping for justice for their lost daughter. The verdict, though expected, brought a mix of emotions: sadness for the irreplaceable loss, but also a sense of closure. The following day, Caitlin Armstrong was brought back to court for sentencing. The judge, in his statement, highlighted the brutality and premeditation of the crime, as well as Caitlin's attempt to flee as clear evidence of her lack of remorse. "You not only took a young and promising life, but also caused incalculable pain to everyone who loved Emo Wilson," the judge declared before delivering the final sentence. Caitlin Armstrong was sentenced to 90 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The harsh sentence reflected the severity of the crime and the need to send a clear message that such cruel and calculated actions would not be tolerated. Caitlin was led away in handcuffs, the sound echoing through the room as she took her last walk as a free woman. For Emo Wilson's family, the sentence brought a measure of peace, but they knew the pain of losing Emo would never fade. The cycling world also deeply felt the loss of a rising star, and Emo Wilson's name became a symbol of talent and brilliance tragically cut short. Caitlin, now locked in a cell, faced a new reality, far from the sunny beaches of Costa Rica and the illusion of freedom she had tried to create. The time she would spend behind bars would serve as a constant reminder of the price she paid for her ruthless actions. And while the world continued to turn, the story of Emo Wilson and the justice that was served would remain in collective memory as a bitter lesson about the dangers of jealousy and obsession. Now that you've followed this shocking story of obsession, jealousy, and tragic consequences, it's time to reflect. What would you do if you were in Colin Strickland's shoes or anyone close to this situation? How do the choices we make, big or small, lead us down unexpected and even dangerous paths? Are you paying attention to the people around you? Are you ignoring warning signs that could save your life or that of someone you love? It's impossible not to wonder how things could have been different. And you, what are you doing to ensure that emotions don't drive your actions in a destructive way? Are you cultivating healthy relationships based on trust and respect? Or are you letting negative feelings consume you, which, if unchecked, could lead to irreversible consequences? Here at Spooky Stories, we believe that learning about these real-life stories is more than just entertainment. It's a wake-up call to be aware of the world around us. Now that you understand the dark side that can lurk behind the quest for fame and validation on social media, it's time to reflect. Are you prepared to face the consequences of your online actions? Do you really know who is on the other side of the screen? Or are you just being lulled into a false sense of security and control? The truth is, in the digital age, the line between admirer and predator can be thinner than you think. So, how will you protect your privacy and safety moving forward? And more importantly, how will you use this knowledge to navigate the vast online world more consciously and safely? If you want to keep learning about the hidden dangers lurking in the shadows of online life and understand how to protect yourself, subscribe now to the Spooky Stories channel and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any new stories and can continue deepening your knowledge on topics that could literally save your life. Let's journey together towards a safer and more informed life. Are you ready for this change?